Okay, so this is our lesson 3.2. I'm Ryan Hayworth. Thank you for watching. This is my Illustrator Basics class, Adobe Illustrator CC. I'm using version 2015. And this lesson is about grouping. So we're going to talk about grouping objects, transforming objects, selecting within groups, and ungrouping, and then expanding objects. And so we will get started right away. As you can see, I have some objects right here on my screen. I have this set as a group, this selection here, and I have these other ones with no grouping at all. So how you can select objects, obviously, is if you have the selection tool, hold down Shift and click multiple objects, and then you have a selection of objects. And the easy way to go to create a group from that is to either come object down to group, or you can see the shortcut key is Command G or Control G on your PC. And so I just did that, and now I have a group. And there are a couple of things that you'll want to keep in as you remember using with groups. Number one, when you have a group, if you select any object within a group, you will select that entire group if you have the selection tool. If you would like to create a group and you have objects of different depth, different arrangement. So arrangement again is front to back placement. For example, this yellow one is behind this blue one, and this blue one was created after this blue one. So I'm in normal, what's the drawing mode? And remember, drawing mode is either draw normal, which is in front of, so we're stacking objects. I could have gone draw behind. Anyway, normal drawing mode means any object I place later in time is going to be higher in the stack as far as the arrangement from front to back, or excuse me, back to front. You will place the further back objects before the new objects. For example, if I grab my rectangle tool, I create one square, the next square is going to immediately be in front of that, and again, and again, and again. I'm sorry, these aren't squares, they're rectangles. So anyway, when you group something from different arrangements, it will take, excuse me, I'll delete those. It will take the furthest front object and align them all to that same depth, that same level. So for example, if I click the yellow square and the blue square, holding down Shift and Control or Command, and then I want to group them with Command G or Control G, they moved up because this yellow one moved in front of this blue one. Let me get my selection tool. You can see the group now. This yellow one moved in front of this blue one because this blue one was created after this blue one. See if I can show you this so it makes some sense. So I have a blue object, another blue object in front, and then I'm going to click a yellow and make a yellow object. I will put that yellow object in front of the blue object here, and you just saw me create this one first, this blue one, then this blue one, and then this yellow one. If I group these two, the blue one behind and the yellow one in front, so Control G, Command G, it moved that blue one in front of this blue one. That's how grouping works. For whatever reason, Adobe decided that it made sense to upgrade or promote or however you want to think about it, the objects in the group to the same depth in the artboard. Okay, so hopefully that makes sense to you. I'm trying to think of any other way I could explain it. Basically, that's all it's doing, is promoting the objects so that they are, as they're in the same group, they are at the same depth, the same level. So bear that in mind. If you have something behind that you're grouping with something in front of an object, everything is going to move in front. So if you have a something that you're using kind of as a drop shadow, or some sort of order in your objects, whatever's behind, if you group it with something in front, it's going to promote it to that front position. So just keep that in mind while you're working with groups. So after you have created a group, you can move, apply effects, transform, resize, etc. as a group. Okay, so I have this group down here, this yellow one and the blue one. Whenever I move one of them, I'm going to move both of them. And when we get to talking about the transform tools, which I call them the transform tools, basically because you can rotate, reflect, you can scale or shear or reshape, and then you can change the warp or the width. Anything you do, well, actually that's a bad example because that's different. Okay, so the free transform tool will also apply to a group, and I'll show you that when we get into those those tools. Yeah, that won't be this week. It'll be next week or the following. So just bear in mind, you can manipulate and transform the group together as a group. So let's go to the selection tool, which is V. And in my preferences, I have the bounding box. And you can see the bounding box right here. It's this blue, thin blue line with the anchor points. And if you go near the anchor point, you'll get a rotation icon. So I can rotate that group together. Or you'll get, if you hover over the corner, you'll get this scale icon, and I can change the scale of the object together or the group together as though it were one object. And that's just one thing that you can do. I will undo that. So you can transform groups together. Now remember, in the very first part of this, I had this group, these three objects already grouped together when I opened the file. Now I have this group here, and we also have the green squares and rectangle group in the back. Let's select all three of them. So I can select the green rectangles group and this multicolored squares group and this blue and white rectangle group together, and I can make a group of that group, or those three groups. So as I do that, again, you saw the green group was promoted in front of all of these other objects that are not groups, and everything is all in the same depth as the front to back depth arrangement as this blue and yellow square group or rectangle group, and then I can move them all together as one. This is really handy if you have a lot of intricate and compound shapes, which we'll discuss later. But you have, say, for example, a logo that you want to have inside of a circle, that you want to have inside of a layout, that you want to have grouped with text, and you have all of these different objects, you can group them. You can group them nesting together. And you think of one of those Matryoshka nesting dolls, the Russian nesting dolls, where the smaller group is inside the larger group, or the smaller doll is inside, and it keeps growing in each shell. So think of that. It's a nesting doll. This is nesting with groups. And then you can also arrange and change the arrangement. So for example, if I hit Command Shift and then the left bracket, I can move all of that entire group to the rear of the artboard. So you can still manipulate with the groups, or you can manipulate the groups as though it were one object in relation to the other objects on the screen, on the artboard. Okay? So nesting groups, just think of it as when you pick up the whole group of groups. When I select any one part of something that is grouped together, I'm going to get the whole group, whether it's a group of objects or a group of groups of objects, or even a group of groups. You can nest them indefinitely. So keep that in mind. I have all of these multiple groups selected, and within each group there are separate objects. Okay? I hope that's clear enough. There's multiple analogies you could think of. In class I used one that kind of went over it, kind of failed. It was a bucket that had a little can that had pens in it, and I was relating the pens and the lids on the pens to things that I could select within or without. Whatever you could think of, a file cabinet with a drawer, and you're selecting the drawer, and within the drawer are folders, and within the folders are different files. You can go any sort of analogy. Just remember that you can have groups within your groups within your groups, and within each of those groups you can also have individual objects. Okay? So when you select a group of objects or a single object with your selection tool, you will get the highermost order of the selection. For example, I right now have this blue square. That is the only object in that group. It's just an object. There is no group really. So I could also select this one. I could select them both at the same time. And then I have essentially a group, but not truly a group because I haven't grouped them. But if I were to select them both and hit the group control, or the group function, which is Command G on a Mac, Control G on a PC, now I have a group. And so any time I select that one group, any object within that group, I'm going to select the whole group with the selection tool. Anytime I use the selection tool, that is the case. However, things change when we start using the other selecting tools, the other tools that we can use to select objects and parts of objects. So selection tool, the V tool if you're familiar with it that way, the black arrow if you're familiar with it that way. That is the selection tool, and that will grab the full group of the entire group that might be attached to it. Okay? So instead, if we grab the direct selection tool, which is A, and I call it A for anchor, because as you recall, this yellow object and this blue object were in a group, and that group was in the group with this one and the other one. If I had the selection tool, I could select all of that. However, I only want to select this yellow rectangle right here. So if I get the direct selection tool, I can click on the fill of that direct selection tool. and then I can manipulate it and move it around wherever I'd like, and it will stay within the group. And you'll see that if I go to V for vector, my selection tool, I click on it again, I still have the entire group and the group of groups actually, rather than just that rectangle. Again, go back to A for the direct selection tool, and I can maneuver, I can select and move that thing around by itself. Now, if you are on the direct selection tool or the selection tool and hold down the command key, it'll switch to the opposite. So if I'm on the A tool, hold down command or control, it'll switch to the direct selection or the selection tool. If I'm on V and I select command, it'll select the A for anchor tool, direct selection tool. So I can have multiple, it's just like when we were doing the finger dance with the pen and the paintbrush and all of the other ones. You can change it up, grab the other selection tool by holding down the command or control on your PC. So why would you want to do that? Well, number one, you can select just that one object, unless of course it has no fill, and let's do that, no fill. Now if I select it, I have to either click the center or I have to select the whole object. If I have the direct selection tool, I can maneuver points individually. I can maneuver multiple points by holding down shift or dragging. Let me show you dragging around those points. I can drag around these points and move them around. Again, if it has no fill, I can't use the direct selection tool to select it unless I find the center of the object. And I can move lines just by clicking on the individual path, the individual line inside an object. So this yellow one, I want to make it taller. I can do that just by using the direct selection tool. Okay. Again, similarly, the lasso tool, I can circle different objects that I want to maneuver and then switch to my selection tool, which will, by holding down control or command, and which will allow me to move any of those objects or points or lines that I have circled with the lasso tool. Okay, now the next one that we can use is the group selection tool, and there's two ways to get it. One is going to that direct selection tool flyout and going down to group selection. The other is by selecting the direct selection tool and holding down the Alt or Option key. And that will, as you see on the icon, give us the group selection tool. So Alt or Option, and then I can select that object. However, as you see, I made a copy of it because I was dragging with the Alt, and as we remember from the finger dance, when you were dragging with the Alt or Option key, it makes a copy. So be very careful. I only want to select it, so I just click and then I let go of Alt, and then I can move it wherever I want. And that goes for any object with or without a fill. Again, let me go back. If I don't have Alt, I click on the line with the direct selection tool. I only move the line. Undo that. If I hold down Alt, click the line, I select the entire object, and then I can move it with the direct selection tool. Okay. So hopefully that will help as you are trying to manipulate and select objects within groups, especially if they are groups within groups within groups within groups. And you want an object way down at the base of that nest. So hopefully that will help you, and we will continue on. Okay, we've discussed the lasso, the selection tool, the direct selection tool, and the group selection tool. The other selecting tool, the other one that you can use to select something, is the magic wand. Now, there are a couple things to keep in mind with the magic wand, and I will show you them. Let's remember what the magic wand shortcut key is. It's Y. Why is it Y? Well, because the magic wand is magic. So remember that. I'll click Y on my keyboard, and then I will show you how to use it. You can use the magic wand tool to select objects of the same color. Now you see on my artboard I have all of these blue objects because I clicked on the blue object. However, there is one thing missing. When you select something that has multiple artboards, so let me come back out to Alt and Control and 0 or Command 0, you can see that on this artboard I have all the blue objects, and this artboard I have all of the blue objects. That makes it really difficult if I want to only select on one artboard. So then let's look and see what we can do by modifying the magic wand preferences on the double-clicking the magic wand icon. And as you see, we have fill color, and it has a tolerance, and the tolerance, of course, is how much similarity there is between the colors. In this case, all the blue icons or objects on the screen on all artboards are the exact same hue. They're the exact same stroke, so that doesn't help us. The exact same stroke weight, that won't help us. Same opacity and same blending mode. So there is absolutely nothing we can do with the preferences to discern whether we want to select all objects of the same color on all artboards or only on the one artboard. So what can we do? Well, the easy way to do it is to select by clicking and then go with your selection tool and deselect by holding down Shift. Deselect each individual object you don't want selected. And now I have all the blue on this artboard. Let's zoom back in and whoops, let's go to the next artboard. The one that I have all the blue selected on. And now we can manipulate, move around, do whatever we need to with those blue objects. However, as you see, it's irrespective of the group, which is awesome because these blue ones were in this blue one was in a group with this one. This blue was in a group with these two squares, and so now I've got them, and I only have the selection regardless of the group. If I click off and then use the direct selection again, look, I've got all of them within that whole humongous group. So Magic Wand is helpful. Just beware that there are times when you are not going to be able to use it as precisely as you want. If you have multiple artboards, you've got to be ever so careful, and keep in mind that your selection will get anything of that same tolerance or color on all artboards. And as you see, now I have all the yellows because that's what I selected. So what can you do to mitigate this problem? Well, first you can, like I showed you, go to the selection tool and deselect by holding down Shift and just deselect each individual object. What happens if you have 50 stars on each artboard that you need to deselect? For that, I would suggest two things. Let's go back to our artboard that we're working with I'm going to select all of the green squares now, and now you see the green ones on this artboard are selected. Let's Alt and Command 0. Why didn't that? Oh, that wasn't Alt. Alt and Command 0 or Alt and Control 0, and you can see that these ones are selected over here. What I would suggest doing is zooming all the way back out to see all of your artboards, and that was Alt and Command 0, Control Alt 0, however you want to remember it, and depending on which system you're running. And then what I would do is this. Simply go to the Q lasso tool, because the lasso tool will allow you to circle around objects that you want to do. However, before you start deselecting or selecting things, hold down that Option key, the Alt key. You can see that the cursor has changed to a select minus. Basically, it's the selection, the lasso tool with a minus attached to it. So holding down Alt or Option and drag around your artboard, and you've now deselected anything within that artboard, as opposed to toggling plus or minus with the selection tool or the direct selection tool. Using the lasso tool in this case is very, very helpful. So again, if I had like 50 stars on here, then I would just use that minus on the lasso tool and circle around the whole artboard, or even if they're beyond the artboard, you know, move it around so that I get way around it, and it'll just drop anything that's on that selection. Okay, so then I have only the selection of this artboard and all of those yellows that were here. If I had another artboard or two, I could use the lasso tool to get around all of the individual artboards, any element that I don't want to be selected, simply by dragging around it while holding the the Alt or Option key. So that's a trick that I've picked up over the years, and hopefully that will help you to use the magic wand with a little bit more finesse and control, because right now the magic wand is pretty I mean, you stab and you hit that, you click that anywhere on the artboard, and you're going to get, or yeah, anywhere on any artboard, and you're going to get that same color object selected all over the whole document, any artboard that you have on that document. Okay, hopefully that will help you. And now we will show you what you can do with groups that is really helpful if you need to ungroup things. All right, real quick. First, let me tell you, you may not want to ungroup your objects. Ask yourself why you would want to ungroup something. Well, so that you can get to the individual objects or groups within that. Well, there's a way to do that, and we'll discuss that in just a little bit in editing groups, isolation mode, etc., which is 3.3, our next lesson. Just know that once you ungroup, it may be difficult to get that group back exactly the way that you had it. So you may forget to, if you want to regroup something, you may forget to click that object and select it to add it into your group. The order may have changed. However, given that disclaimer, you may want to say, for example, you have 3 objects that you have in your group. You only want 2 of them. Ungroup, select those 2 again, group, and now you have the grouping that you are looking for. So just be very careful ahead of time if you are absolutely certain that you want to ungroup your objects or ungroup your group into individual objects. So I'm going to zoom in here so it's a little closer. Command 0 on the Mac, Control 0 on a PC, and I'm going to take a look. This is the wrong artboard. Let's go to the next artboard. This is the one that has my groups on it. Why do I even have that artboard? Anyway, whatever. So I will select with the selection tool. I will click on a group, which happens to have a group of groups. I want to ungroup it so that I only have the group that I have selected here. These three objects used to be squares, but I have since distorted them like crazy. So I will Command Shift G, Control Shift G on your PC, and deselect, and now I can just select that single group that I wanted, and there you go. Now if I click on this group, I have it separated. If I click on, what was my other group? These two shapes. That was my other group, and then I had the green ones. So I have 4 groups on my artboard, and instead of one big humongous group. Okay, that makes it pretty easy. If your reasoning for ungrouping was to select individual objects within the group, well, remember that you can use the lasso tool or any of the other selection tools and probably get what you're looking for without ungrouping, and it doesn't destroy the group. For example, the A for anchor or the direct selection tool, if I want to move this green box somewhere else but keep it within the group, I can do that. Now I go back to V for the selection tool, and now I can select all 3 of the green ones at the same time. So just be wary. Ask yourself, why do I want to break up this family? Why do I want to ungroup these objects? Because, you may end up regretting the result. You may end up with something that you don't want, or it may be the direction that you're looking for. You want to separate some of the objects from one of those that's already within a group, and so ungrouping is the ideal. Go ahead and do that. Command Shift or Control Shift, and then G will ungroup, and now I can select just these 2 smaller ones and make their own happy little group away from the big mean green one here. Okay, so that is ungrouping, and now I'm going to show you on my other artboard, number 3 over here, how to, what else you can do and why another reason you would want to ungroup, and that is the expand. So let's first discuss what expand does. So I'm going to get a happy star. If you know me, you know I like to use the star because it's a lot of points, an intricate looking object with just one stroke of my pen. So let's increase the stroke to about a 10. Let's put that stroke on the outside. Let's give it our object itself. Let's turn it into a gradient, and that is the greater than. So the gradient, and again we have the fill selected, so we hit gradient greater than, and why didn't it work? Okay, well, whatever. And then I want to modify that gradient a little bit, just to have something to look at. And let's take a pause here and talk about what's going on the screen. So I have a star outline, or a star object. Within that object, I have a gradient which has 1, 2, 3, 4 different colors. I've got a black, a almost black, very dark gray actually, a light gray, and white. And then I also have a black stroke, and that stroke has a 10-point width, and it is outside the borders of the object. Okay, so that's what my object is, and then I can come up here to the object menu and hit expand appearance. So you have 2 options. Sometimes you'll see expand and sometimes you'll see appearance. What is the difference and what does that mean? Well, if you look at the appearance menu which is over here. It's this one that looks like a little sun, the little sundial or whatever it's called. You can see all of the effects, all of the attributes that make up the appearance of what you're seeing here. So the difference between expand appearance and straight up expand, sometimes you will have a group or a compound path, compound shape, and with that you can expand. If you only have a simple object like the star, it's straight from the star tool, then you would have expand appearance. And so what you would do is you go to the object, down to expand appearance, and let's see what has happened now. So you can see I have some more lines, some more points on my my object here. But if I hit the selection tool and drag that thing around, and again I'm accessing the selection tool by holding down Command or Control, and I can just move it around, there's no difference. There is no difference from what I am used to seeing. So let's go with Command and Shift and G to, as you just learned, ungroup this object. So now I will click off, Control click away from that object to deselect everything. I could have gone up here to the selection menu and gone down to deselect, which is Shift Command A or Shift Control A on your PC. I don't do that because for me, holding down Command with my finger that I already have hovering on that and then clicking is a whole lot easier than finding Shift and Command and A. Where's A? Right there. Okay, so that's why I do it that way. It's just a preference. It's just something that I do. So now what I've done is I have separated the star object from its star outline stroke. And so I can manipulate that, and I can move and change, and I can, do all sorts of fun things with it. So that is the expand appearance. Why would you want to do that? Well, what if you have a something that you want to use as a background or a drop shadow? Another thing is if you have, for example, a very complex shape and you would like to use that, the stroke outline as maybe a fill or something. And so instead of, there are some other ways you can go about it, but if you expand that object, separating the stroke from the object itself, then I can use the object as a drop shadow, maybe, there's a lot of different things you could do. Let's go back to the default colors. Now I can add another stroke, and I can make that stroke back to 10 points, and now it looks like I have a copy and a copy of the stroke. I don't know what other, no, it's not that I don't know. There are many other reasons like why you would want to do that. That's just one of them that I could think of right off the top of my head. So go ahead and expand appearance, and the objects again will be grouped immediately after you do that. And so you'll need to ungroup if you want to manipulate each individually. And what it does is it separates the fills, the stroke, and the gradient of the object. Okay, so that is lesson 3.2. We are trucking right along and moving at a fast pace today. I'm so glad that I upgraded or switched from Camtasia to ScreenFlow, from a system that wasn't working, that was causing me a whole lot of headache, to a better workflow. So there's my little plug for ScreenFlow. Anyway, I will see you on the next one, and I hope you enjoy your time working with groups and ungrouping and expanding your objects in Illustrator.